You're watching CBC News Today. I'm Nancy Wilson. If you need any evidence that internet sites are changing the political landscape, consider this. Hillary Clinton's presidential campaign has a, quote, internet director who presides over a staff of 10, and he's planning more hires. Almost all the American presidential hopefuls have profiles on both MySpace and Facebook, using the networking sites to reach out to younger, more tech-savvy voters. For more on the trend, joined now by our own tech expert, Jesse Hirsch. So we've talked a lot in the past about, how politics is being shaped and changed by technology, and specifically internet and bloggers. But this is the first time, I guess, we've talked about Facebook being a vehicle, certainly in the presidential campaign. And I know you talk about how advanced politics is on the internet in the U.S. Why would candidates want to figure prominently on Facebook? What's the strategy there?
Well, there's two reasons. One, as you sort of inferred, is the youth vote. If a candidate is able to mobilize what's essentially an apathetic constituency, it could have a huge impact vis-a-vis their other contenders. But the other is the way that really the internet allows for a self-identification, in the sense that everyone you link up to on Facebook, you know which district they're in.
Right.
You know which state they're in. So it's a lot easy, especially with a very busy primary season, to identify where key supporters are, to mobilize them to go get their own friends and do the type of social networking that Facebook facilitates. So, for example, your New Hampshire members can be mobilized for a special announcement in New Hampshire or the primary itself.
And it has that quick response capacity. We know there's a daily feeding frenzy on Facebook. So every day you feed into that and you can get the word out so quickly that, yeah, it does it. Logistically, it makes total sense.
Well, and mobilizing the vote becomes really a much easier measure, but also leveraging it so it becomes a large amount of people. In this case, young people, but more and more not so young people who are also using Facebook and MySpace.
And you know what's interesting is that we know that they are showcasing themselves and reinventing their personas on things like YouTube. The whole idea is they don't want to be seen as starchy. So again, they're doing this. I mean, the classic case, of course, is Hillary Clinton and that Sopranos send-off.
Well, and it's a different spin on the way communications are done in politics. You know, traditionally it was about one-to-many and using big speeches with big key words. Now it's about intimacy. It's about connecting with the candidate, making them feel that it's a one-on-one, and using sly humor like the last Sopranos scene makes people feel that they're inside the joke, right? They're part of the team. And that level of intimacy, I think, motivates people to be memes, as it were, to spread and infect the message of the candidate so that their support really stretches as far as it can.
I guess there's always the potential that it can misfire. I mean, Obama Girl, was a bit controversial, raised a few eyebrows. So there's an element of risk when you go this route, right?
Well, and I think it's really a lack of control. That you no longer can you control the campaign. You hope to influence it, but in extending the stage, right, the internet sort of enfranchises people to become, freelance campaigners. Unfortunately, you can't control what they do, and they may embarrass you. And I suspect there'll be even a type of infiltration where, someone who will ostensibly join another candidate as if they're a supporter will deliberately try to embarrass themselves or embarrass the candidate as a way of indirectly sabotaging them in benefits of a competitor.
That would be the whole new dimension of campaign dirty tricks. And you're right, again, once you're on the internet, you can claim to be whatever you want. So you can sort of say, how can I sign up? I want to be a loyalist, a good soldier in the campaign, and actually all you're trying to do is scuttle the campaign.
Well, and I think the notion of a fog of war appropriately articulates the inability to source who's behind some of the attacks. There'll be a lot of anonymized or even pseudonymized attacks where you think it's one person, but it may be a political action committee affiliated with the Republicans attacking the Democrats.
Wow.
But to find that out will be virtually impossible. So there'll be lots of really crazy and perhaps extremely negative attacks that we'll see in this campaign.
Now, we've talked about political blogging before, but I have to assume the scope and the sophistication and reach of blogging is going to be just unprecedented, right?
Well, and I think a legitimacy and a seriousness by which bloggers will not only take themselves, but the mass media, I think, will really listen to bloggers in terms of deciding what to cover and using them almost as a litmus test for the American public at large and seeing really how speeches are received and how different ideas are spinning themselves through the campaign. So bloggers, I think, will perhaps change the notion of punditry to make it more democratic and more of a level playing field.
And bloggers are being invited to have all official campaign access. So they'll be on the buses and on the planes. So again, that just reinforces their legitimacy, right?
Well, and they're a milieu of gadflies.
Yeah.
They'll make sure that all the candidates and even all the journalists really are true to their message. And anytime there's a gaffe, anytime there's a screw up, the bloggers will be there to amplify it and make sure it gets as much coverage as it can. So I think it'll be a really interesting campaign.
Absolutely. And Howard Dean, I guess, started the ball rolling when he used the internet so effectively for fundraising. We've gone so far past that, but it all comes back to, again, the whole idea that the internet does provide a level playing field. So in other words, some of these third-party fringe candidates do have the same stage to dance on that the established candidates do.
Well, and I think what it comes down to is, you know, there's a notion of a political machine. The internet allows you to create a virtual political machine almost overnight. So if there is a protest candidate or a populist candidate, it'll be very easy for them to amass a large group of supporters and really reach out nationally across the United States to potentially have considerable impact, which I think is making the two mainstream parties a little nervous about what could happen.
Well, we know it's a marathon campaign, and it's bound to take on a life of its own just because of all these different areas of activity. Fascinating stuff. Jesse, thanks for this.
Thank you.